Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to see so many of you joining us today for our webinar that's focused on elevating the needs of the homeless services workforce. We'll be talking about recent surveys that highlight challenges that people who work in homeless services are facing related to salaries, other challenges in the workplace, and just some general concerns that they have raised through at least two surveys. My name is Joy Moses. I work with the National Alliance to End Homelessness. I'm joined today by Donna Gallup from Azusa Pacific University. I'm just going to start with a little bit of housekeeping. The chat is enabled, so if you are interested in chatting with fellow participants in the conversation today, please do so, but please do so. We ask that you please do so respectfully. We definitely want to continue our pattern of having a supportive community around these issues. We also have a Q&A box if you are interested in raising questions about the presentations today. We will be doing some overview of we will be doing two overviews of the survey findings, and then following those talking points, we'll open the floor for the questions that you are more than welcome to enter into the Q&A box throughout the session. If you have just general questions for the presenters, you can also enter them in the Q&A box if it's not necessarily about the presentation itself. I'm going to get started. I'm happy to see Donna here today. Donna, do you want to say hello to the audience?
I was going to say good morning from where I am, but welcome everybody. Thank you very much for participating. I am very excited about this topic. It's been a passion of mine for at least 5 or 6 years. So I'm looking forward to hearing Joy's presentation and answering any questions after mine as well.
And sorry for putting you on the spot there, but I just wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to say hello as I am about to launch into some of the findings of the Alliance's recent survey. Our findings can be found on our website as a recent report at endhomelessness.org. So I'm going to go ahead and begin. So I wanted to give a little bit of background about why we decided to engage in this project. Essentially, as folks who work at the national level in homelessness, we were hearing a lot of information from people in the field about challenges that they were experiencing and concerns that they had. And we hear about this in various forms, meetings, conferences, through our advocacy, but also we have a number of work groups associated with our organization. We also knew that there were challenges because just in general, we were hearing it from our colleagues in other spaces that have to do with working in human services, whether it was healthcare workers, health aides, educators, teachers and teachers' aides, or childcare workers. It seemed to be a growing trend and a growing conversation over the last couple of years, and homeless services is no different. Third, our Homelessness Research Institute conducted a series of surveys and focus groups in the early days of the pandemic at its onset and for roughly the first 2 years. And one thing that came up strongly and repeatedly were various reports of organizations and agencies being understaffed and not being able to fully use increased government resources because of those issues. There's other research that came out about average salaries of the profession. So we delved in and decided to do a couple of projects that were focused on the limits of current average salaries in the field, but also just calculating the gap between what people are earning and what they need to afford housing. And our estimates were as a collective, for the workforce, there is a $4.8 billion shortage in how much people should be making, and they are not. So as people who work in policy, that's the number we're concerned about, and how do we fill that gap? A next step for us also seemed to be a good next step would be to do a survey and to better understand to help us better understand the challenges, help us shape policy, but also we figured it would help us with advocacy efforts. It helps us to be able to tell a story and to cite numbers from the field about how these issues are impacting the workforce. So we opened a survey this summer. Was open for 2 months. Anyone who heard about it was invited to participate. So it was based on opportunity. It was based on who wanted to participate. So that did create somewhat of a limitation because we did not select the sample. In the end, we had a little over 5,000 respondents to the survey. I wanted to highlight a couple of things about our participants. In the end, they came from all 50 states and the District of Columbia. We noted that if you can see the little bar chart on the bottom left here, that most of them came from the South and the West, but we also noted that significant amounts or the largest populations of people experiencing homelessness are also in those regions. So we wondered if that was the reason why there were more workers in those areas. Urban people serving urban areas were the majority, and again, urban areas is where most people experiencing homelessness are found. A couple of other things about our respondents. They were largely female, 77%. They were definitely racially diverse, and most had participated in higher education. A full 92% had at least some college or an associate degree, and 68% had a bachelor's. We are curious to the extent that this matches the actual population of the homeless services workforce. However, we don't have any census data for the workforce to compare it against. So it's possible that this is an accurate reflection of what the workforce looks like, but it's also possible that the people who decided to respond to our survey were different in certain ways or tended to be from certain populations more than others. We're somewhat interested in the education component, worried essentially that we did not reach enough of the workers who had lesser levels of education. I wanted to highlight a couple of things about the types of jobs that respondents had. This is clearly a very important aspect of how they answered the questions. Majority identified as frontline workers or managers of frontline workers, but we did have some folks who were in other settings, like they worked for a CLC agency. We had a few homeless education liaisons, so they worked for school districts. So there were various other types of professions, but most people identify themselves as being frontline worker. And we define that as as basically spending at least 25% of your time with people experiencing homelessness or who had recently experienced homelessness. We also looked at the places where people worked. The most prominent ones were in permanent housing programs or emergency shelter or transitional housing, but there were other pretty much people from other areas where we would expect when we're reaching out to the homeless services workforce, street outreach, coordinated entry, et cetera. They pretty much had a broad range of years of experience, except for we noticed that there was a little less people in the 6 to 9 year range. So a little drop off from the entry level and going into some of the more extensive years of experience. And one thing that a big issue as we get more into the conversation is salaries. So we were curious how much people were making. We asked them to fill those numbers in. The majority were making salaries that were $50,000 a year or under. We noted that we further noted that this number puts them at risk of not being able to afford housing. So, and we got to that by looking at estimates of how much people should be making in order to only spend about 30% of their income on housing costs. So that was a flag for us, a flag for concern. And it shows up in other places in our survey as you'll hear me talk about. But before we get into some of those things, we did want to know a little bit more about the field and the people working in the fields. We asked a couple questions that tried to get at, why are you doing this work? Why are you drawn to being in homeless services? And we received a number of responses that we put under the umbrella of altruism, essentially, because people said basically selected the options that indicated that they were looking for meaningful work, they wanted to do something that was worthwhile, et cetera. And those things show up on the chart on the right, and you can see some of the other. These were like the pre-selected options that we gave people, but we asked them about a sense of calling, feelings that they're doing worthwhile work. Sorry, I think I mentioned that before. Another thing that showed up strongly was this was definitely a group of people who valued relationships with people, relationships with clients, and relationships with the people that they work with. I wanted to also highlight a couple of answers because we allowed people to fill in answers in a lot of areas. So I did want to highlight some of those fill-in answers. It was an oversight for us not to ask people about whether their lived experience of homelessness had drawn them to the profession. So when given the write-in option, we had a number of people write that in. It was overwhelming because it wasn't a pre-selected field. I suspect that there were other folks who would have given that same answer, but we honestly neglected to ask it. But essentially, we saw a lot of people saying, I've experienced these things. I want to help people who are in similar circumstances. Other people mentioned coming into the field because they worked in other areas, like they had worked with veterans before and they were concerned about veterans, and then ended up working with a subset of veterans who had experienced homelessness. The same for areas like human trafficking and children and youth. And then to be quite frank, we had a segment of people who cited some very practical reasons aside from some of the ones I already mentioned. There were a few people who mentioned they lost a job in the pandemic and they just needed to find new work and have income, or they had very practical work-life balance concerns. Some just wanted a career change. So we noted that as well. And then we started to dig into what it was like to work at their organizations and agencies. We specifically asked about a couple of areas. We were curious about the extent to which people would would describe their work environment as being understaffed, meaning the organization is not able to serve everyone who's experiencing homelessness or is unable to meet critical goals. An overwhelming majority, 74%, said their organization fit into that category. They were understaffed. Similarly, 71% said that their organization or agency was experiencing high turnover. We were curious about how the turnover piece was impacting workers, but also impacting their ability to serve people. And indeed, of those who said that their workplace was experiencing high turnover, again, overwhelmingly 90% said that it was causing stress on the remaining employees. And significantly, 75% said it was causing disruptions in service delivery. So essentially impacting people who experience homelessness and our ability to assist them and help end homelessness. People were working longer hours. There was definitely 63% were saying there were challenges building relationships and trust with clients, some big areas of concern. I'll mention a couple of others that people wrote in. A lot of the write-in areas were some of the most interesting. Some people were very expressive, and I tried to summarize it to the best I can. I wish I could share every answer, but in the end, we ended up categorizing some of them. But there were a number of responses that I started to qualify as signs of despondency. People use words like burnout, low morale, feeling underappreciated, and hopelessness. People mentioned that these challenges were threatening their funding because they were preventing them from completing service contracts or grant deliverables, sorry. We had a few people mention that it was impacting the quality of staffing that was available to serve people, a reluctance, for instance, to get to separate from staff that who were not the best for the job, or significantly relying on a lot of volunteers who may not have been as reliable as workers who are salaried. People pointed out inefficient use of resources through constantly having to train new people, various leadership challenges, largely having to do with building staff cohesion, building a strong team environment, and then a loss of institutional knowledge every time someone who has been trained and been working with people leaves. So because salary comes up a lot in the conversations that we have with the field, that did become an issue that we focused on. One of the questions that we asked, which I didn't include the chart for, but how was salary impacting people's ability to access basic needs? By far, the largest answer, the most popular answer was basically my salary is just enough to meet my basic needs. Only 14% would say that they are living well, meaning that their basic needs are taken care of and a lot of wants. But there was this disturbing, more than a third of people saying that they weren't earning enough to meet their basic needs. we were kind of curious, like, well, how are people getting by if the salaries aren't the greatest? We started to categorize the responses into two areas. One of them, I will say is relative, that we thought that they were relatively less harmful. Certainly not everyone in those situations are in the best possible situations, but there seems to be a potential that it was relatively less harmful. And I should cite an example of what I mean by that, but we had a little over half of people saying that they were making ends meet by sharing finances with a spouse or partner. And that's the second bar there on the right. Another big response is they were doing without the things that they want. Other people, there's a smaller number of people, 22%, who were living with a parent. Again, obviously not 100% of these situations are may be healthy or the best, but it at least seems like it could possibly be, and maybe that's a good way to make ends meet. But then we had a second category of people who seem to be clearly struggling financially, using credit cards to pay their bills. That was 32%, relying on charities. And then our write-in answers included things like taking out personal loans, having their teenage children take jobs to help make ends meet, things like donating plasma and skipping meals and filing for bankruptcy. And I'll just mention a couple of other slides because I do want to get into Donna's presentation, but I'll highlight a few more. We were curious about the things that just people specifically were worried about paying for. Again, we tried to categorize these things. People mentioned things that were basically threats to their financial security. Some of the big bubbles here on this chart are that people were worried about savings for emergencies or saving for retirement. There were things that people were worried about that had to do with just living a quality life, like being able to save for a vacation. At 54% of people indicated that was a problem. And then again, some of the more worrying categories, like being worried about paying for food, which was 35%, and housing, which is 40% of the respondents. Something that is troublingly ironic for a group of people who are trying to help other people find housing, that they're worried about they're paying for their own housing. A good number of people had multiple worries. Nearly half had 5 or more things that they were worried about. We asked a couple of things that got at poverty indicators. Again, similar to some of the previous chart, some people had reported hunger. 3% of the workforce respondents said they themselves were homeless. We asked if they were participating in anti-poverty programs or thought that they qualified for them. The overwhelming majority said no, but there was a slice of people, 12%, who were either on SNAP or thought they qualified for it. And another popular one was housing choice vouchers. I'll briefly, I won't spend too much time on benefits. For those people who had benefits, they were largely content with them, but there was a small segment who didn't have access to benefits, particularly the one that they were most likely not to have access to was retirement. Again, I'll want to move along, but want to give you an opportunity to see some of the responses that we got in other areas. We asked about workplace challenges. The top line one, the one that people picked most, which I think speaks a lot about the workforce, is that they said that they thought the biggest challenge was they can't give enough people housing, and this is frustrating. And then second, they said, I'm stressed and worried about my clients. And then it's not till the third item that we see something that's more focused inward or on themselves, which is being overworked and receiving limited rewards or wins tied to work. Again, some interesting things in the write-in. We heard about varying forms of bureaucracy challenges, discrimination, quite a few people mentioning age discrimination as older adults, and also people with disabilities, religion-based discrimination, and being discriminated against because they have lived experience of homelessness. People were worried about their coworkers and the stresses that they were under, feelings, job insecurity, because they didn't know if their agencies were going to continue to have the resources to employ them, those types of things. Oh, and of course, the public perceptions of how well their agencies are addressing homelessness, and just general feeling of a lack of support from communities. I'll highlight a few needs. People mentioned that they need more resources to serve clients, more staff to help. That again, things that are not surprising given the responses to the other questions. But they also mentioned almost half, 47% needing more time off for rest and recharge, and about a third, for a little under a third, needing more training opportunities. They had some suggestions for us, which is good. They wanted student loan repayment assistance, mentorship programs, mental health leave, technology upgrades, some of which were should be doable, like computers that aren't refurbished, or a Zoom account that is paid for and that is not free. So some very basic things. People were interested in career ladders, and some just said, I need appreciation. And they said that in various ways. I'll mention that we asked about future plans. Little over a third said they were considering leaving their jobs, but we also want to look at the flip side of this question, and that a significant number of people wanted to stay in their positions. Again, also not surprising given the responses to the questions. The biggest reason people were thinking about, the biggest reason people cited for wanting to potentially leave their job was their limited salary and benefits and the on-the-job stress. We pulled a couple of quotes that that people wrote into the survey, significantly again, they reflected financial distress and the stresses of the work. And one person saying that they were thinking about leaving because of the stress, quote, the stresses of witnessing participants pass away and seeing participants cycle back through the shelter system after being housed. And lastly, I'll say another statement that someone wrote in. I love this work. This work is my calling, but I should be paid fairly. And I get dismissed when I even bring it up. As someone with over 15 years of experience, my salary should be more than $50,000 a year. And our board of supervisors and leaders act like this is unreasonable. I will close by saying that obviously there is much work ahead. We note this, we note the challenges. We at the Alliance are thinking about ways that we can work with our national partners and people in the field to identify ways that we can secure more funding for the workforce, but also come up with solutions to address some of the other issues that were raised. And I'm going to stop there and turn the floor over to, turn the floor over to Donna. I was doing okay for a moment. Okay. Yes, you were able to start your share. Okay. Donna?
Thank you, Joy. So after all of that information, I myself am glad that I have an opportunity to talk about some positive work that we have been doing in the homeless sector, particularly with social workers. Before I do that, I want to thank the Alliance for inviting me to participate in this webinar, but also to highlight that this project was really started by the Corporation for Supportive Housing and my colleagues, Dara Weinger and Ben Hedwood from USC, have been my partners in making this happen, even though I'm just the voice today. So we started with, obviously, the problem you're all experiencing in Southern California, significant homelessness combined with vacant positions. At the time that we started this project in 2017, we had not only a high homeless count, but we had Measure H, which was significant funding that was going to be coming down. Finding providers were already at maximum capacity, and really that we didn't have a natural path, as was mentioned in the survey, career path for Masters of Social Work graduates to enter the sector. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says only about 1% of our social workers are employed in the homeless sector. So we sought to change that. And this graph just highlights what Joy pointed out, the conditions, the underfunding, the impact to mental health, along with, of course, the salary and the pay that may not be competitive with other sectors. So in 2017, the Corporation for Supportive Housing hired me as a consultant to work with them. They had a Hilton Foundation funded grant that was really looking at those career pathways for underserved populations. And we started this program called now called the Homeless Social Work Education Program. After the program ended the first 2 years, Dara from CSH and I, along with the support of CSH, kept the program going, and Ben Henwood from USC, as part of the leadership on the Grand Challenges for Social Work to End Homelessness, joined our effort. So I want to just acknowledge the partners. There's a lot of partners. I think there's a lot of our provider partners on the webinar today. So I'm excited to see some of those from Southern California. These are the universities that have participated in the program. And we found very early on the challenge with recruiting interns to do their placements in the homeless sector and housing was that we were competing with paid internships. We were also really on an uphill battle to overcome the stigma of what their internship would look like and their experience would be once they entered their internship and potentially the job force. To this point, we're in year 6, and we've had 43 Los Angeles County homeless providers or organizations that serve the unhoused participate. So we've had government jurisdictions, we've had hospitals, we've had some of the homeless providers as well. And when we started, we also realized that part of our issue was that capacity. A lot of the organizations are already stretched thin, so taking on an intern onto their agency seemed to many overwhelming. Also, many of the providers lacked qualified social work field or practicum instructors internally, as well as preceptors, those that could help support and oversee the work day to day. So this was something early on. We were fortunate to have some funding so that we could pay field instructors externally to support those agencies, but we definitely were able to build some capacity early on. For the students, they have to be in their last year of their Master's Social Work program. They have to be willing to participate in a year-long training program. And also they must be placed in either with a homeless provider or working with homeless populations. I also want to acknowledge, I know that LAHSA, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, our continuum of care lead, is also on, I know, on the webinar. In the past, for the last 5 years, they've also provided a stipend to our graduates. And that has been really a wonderful gift to the students and the interns. But I just want to say that it hasn't been an incentive necessarily to enter the program or the internship with a homeless provider because our budget years seem to not align perfectly. So we usually find out at some point during the year that they're going to get the stipend. So we've had 72 MSW interns graduate in our first 5 cohorts. And our whole concept was, if we have a little stipend, if we have the training and we have a cohort model with students coming from multiple universities, and we provide that experience of being in the homeless sector, that we will be able to influence the career trajectory of social workers and hope that they will want to enter the sector as a career and also have some longevity there. So just I know we don't have a lot of time, but this is what we've evolved to. The training has evolved over the years. The group of the cohort meets monthly. We cover a number of important issues, and we also give the students the opportunity to a little bit of self-directed learning in terms of specialized components that they may want to talk more about. I think last year or the year before, older adult homelessness was a topic that we covered. It was an interest to many. So you asked, how do we know that this program is making a difference? Try and keep this brief. We have been utilizing a validated tool, Attitudes Towards Homelessness Inventory, from the very beginning, and we do a pre and post, first day and last day of the program, measuring whether or not student attitudes towards homelessness have changed. So we have been really excited that the most significant shifts in attitude that we're finding for the students is towards direct work with homeless populations. It's also, the training has also influenced their beliefs about homeless people and discrimination against homeless. They also have a better understanding of program costs and the role of government in addressing the homeless problem. And we have definitely seen, as you'll see in a few more slides, an interest in pursuing a career in the homeless sector. So we're real excited. 5 years of data has shown that the program is humanizing people experiencing homelessness, and anecdotally, we knew that students were graduating and entering the homeless sector as careers. But the big question that we kept getting over and over again was, well, that's nice, you're changing attitudes, but does this program really influence social worker career trajectory? So we embarked on an alumni survey, and we're really excited. This, to me, really demonstrates what we knew was happening, but after 5 years, to be able to see it as hard data was amazing. 80% of the alumni that responded to our survey said that they are currently working in the homeless sector or always working with homeless. Again, highlight that compared to 1%, right, that social workers that enter the homeless sector. 80% agree or strongly agree that the training prepared them for a career in the homeless sector. And I think that that's really important given Joy's findings and the Alliance's findings, right? Is there something about the training that's providing that resiliency and that interest and that ability to stay in the sector? 60% reported that the program influenced their career decision. And I also wanted to highlight, even those that said that they were not working in the homeless sector are still, 1/3 of them still working with homeless, and about half saying that they occasionally work with homeless. So we know that the program is really having a significant reach. There's just some quotes here from the alumni that came back from the survey, which really reinforced the belief that we had that if we could help change attitudes towards homeless and reduce that stigma about careers in the homeless sector, that we would be able to bring more social workers into a growing clinical need for our clients. And this is year 6. Going forward, we have 24 students this year. We have 17 Los Angeles County homeless providers participating, 5 universities. USC, CSH, and APU are still leading the training, and our loss of stipend is still pending. We're also real excited that there is some grant funding pending that will help us examine whether or not we can create a homeless and poverty specialization, and to highlight what Joy has been pointing out, to really do a deeper dive into a compensation analysis for the homeless and housing sector in Los Angeles County. So I just want to say that we're very excited that we have had this program. We have been operating it without any funding because we know it has an impact, and now we have the data to show that. So thank you for listening and for allowing me to share about this glimmer of hope in that very hard to look at data about the work in the sector that we're in. And I'll pass it back to Joy.
Thanks. Thanks, Donna. That was very interesting, and obviously your work is important as we think about ways that we can better support workers in the field. So happy to have you here today. I'll just mention again, if you are interested in asking a question, please do put your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. And I will go through a couple of them that I see that were already here. The first one I think pertains to my presentation and about the salary bands that we cited. Do they represent full-time employment only? The answer to that, Anna, is yes. For the salary cited, we focused in on full-time employees defined as working at least 35 hours a week. I will note though that we had some part-time employees answering the survey, but we didn't include them in that particular question. And I think there may have been some others where it seemed like it was relevant. But we didn't want to totally exclude the part-time workers because some people were working part-time because there were no other options, like they couldn't get more hours. There's a question I'm seeing in the chat for Donna. Could you go back to the Venn diagrams slide? Oh, I guess maybe someone was interested in learning more about that third item. After stipend in the training cohort. Can you talk about that a little more?
Yeah, so I mean, basically the model had the intersection of 3 components, right? So our social work students and interns that enter field placement, they get a lot of training from their field sites, but they don't get consistent training. So there's the training component. So now we have, no matter what placement you're in or what university you're at, you're getting the same training across the year. There was the component of the stipend. So they are getting that stipend from the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority for participating and completing the program. And then the third part was really having a cohort model as well as their on-site field experience. So there's 2 pieces to that. One, they're learning from each other because they're coming from different schools, different placements, and then also they are getting the field on-site experience while they're getting the training. So hopefully that explains those 3 components. And Joy, there's one question in the Q&A I'll just hit if you don't mind. And it speaks to, the question is about how do you overcome the university requirements for BSW and MSWs, right? For you to host interns as a homeless provider. And that is what this program originally started to address by hiring external field instructors, practicum instructors, to help, because we know that so many homeless providers do not have the requisite MSW to provide that internship oversight. So that is something that we acknowledge as an issue, and part of the way that we're going to address that is by getting more social workers to enter that the workforce and be able to then also be able to supervise the students.
I must apologize. I realized I was neglecting the raised hands, so I'm going to try this because I actually haven't done this in the webinar. So I'll start with Lauda Lee.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have had it. That's a mistake. I don't have a question.
Okay. There seems to be another one from Minda. Okay, maybe that isn't quite working. I'll pull a couple of more comments or questions from the Q&A section, and maybe I'll try it again at another point. For Donna, can you talk more about what you mean by stigma impacting attitudes toward employment within the homeless services system? A stigma toward the population or stigma toward the types of roles and salaries that will be available to them?
Yes, I was actually just typing an answer, but I'd be happy to answer that. So it's both. If you look at the pre-surveys, and these are students who have agreed to enter the internship, right, in the homeless sector to begin with. So we're already looking at a group of people that would have less judgment and stigma towards the homeless, and there is definitely the attitudes towards the homeless population themselves. It's also the work, though, and I don't want to say the individuals, but there's concerns of safety, concerns with what kinds of roles. Many social workers have a lot of options as graduates to enter areas that are much more pleasant to work in. And I come from working in the homeless sector, so hopefully no one judges me on that. That's my background. But it's not always a job that is glorified, and they can go work in so many other sectors. They can go work in schools, they can go work in hospitals, they can go work in mental health. So to even recruit individuals to do their internship in the homeless sector, there's a belief that perhaps they will not get as much learning, they will not get as much of the therapy or the counseling that they want to learn about. So there's both. And I also do think that there is stigma in terms of where they potentially see their careers going. If they do their internship, many students go into their last year hoping that they will do an internship that will lead to a job opportunity. And if they really don't see that as lucrative or benefiting them in terms of their career trajectory, they're not likely to want to enter those internships.
And then I'll address two, I think, relatively quick questions that were directed towards me. The first one was, what differences in responses were found across job types or other population segments? I can tell you that we're actually still analyzing the survey results. we did the survey during the summer and we had a lot of folks who were interested. So we did the top line results. But one of the things that we want to do now is to do some follow-up analysis to get to subgroup differences. You know, some ones that we're particularly interested in are like how people answer questions differently based on their years and working in homelessness, or maybe even region of the country or other demographic factors. So stay tuned. And then there is another question here about does the Alliance have any data on staff that experienced trauma while on the job? We did not directly ask that question. I guess in some of our open-ended responses, we saw some responses to that effect. Related to like why people were considering leaving their jobs or challenges. There were a number of responses that suggested trauma, and that it does seem to be an area that that we should follow up on. Let me see here. Of other questions that you may have. I think this may be more so a question for Donna. Have you reached out to community health workers, or I guess do you have a connection with them or relationship with them? And can you speak to that a little bit, maybe more generally, like other partners that have been contributing to this work and maybe available?
Yeah, so we have talked about other disciplines. There are a couple of questions along with that around certificate programs, and how do we expand that to other disciplines? Obviously, social workers are not the only discipline that's needed in the homeless sector, but to be quite honest, and hopefully my peers that are on the call won't object to me couching it this way. We have done this on our own. We've not been able to secure any funding to replicate or implement this. I've spoken at 2 national conferences this fall, and I oftentimes get a lot of people asking me, can you replicate this in our area? How do we get the support so that we can do the same type of program? And we just continue to do it because it's been something that we're very passionate about. It's definitely a need. I love the ideas. Hopefully you all can reach out to Joy or reach out to me. And if you have any ways that we could help you expand it in your areas, I'm sure that we would love to see it replicated. We also didn't have data, and now that we're going into having alumni in the field long enough, that's also really exciting to actually get back the data and see 80% entering the homeless sector or working with homeless. So hopefully maybe some of that data will help us find some funding to expand this.
You may have touched on this a little bit, but Amy has a very good question about just, do you think that your program is replicable? And how might we go about partnering with a local CSU? I guess is that maybe, I'm not sure of the acronym. Sorry about that, Amy. But could you talk about replicating and what that might look like?
So I think it can be replicated. As I said, that we're in year 6 and the data has been very consistent. The attitudes towards homelessness inventory, the data we've gotten back over the 5 years has consistently shown that we're having an impact on attitudes, and now we have this alumni data. So Yes, and if you're in Southern Cal and you have a site, as I said, I know some providers that participate in our program, they not even realize that some students are participating in the program. Please let us know. It's interesting that as I was talking about the stigma, we've never fully filled the entire program to capacity because it's been hard sometimes to recruit students who want to do their final placement in the homeless sector, and then to get the agency to support the training that they commit to.
And we're almost out of close, but I want to get to some of these questions. I'm going to ask you one more. Are there resources that could be provided, like learning contracts, practicum training sequences for supervision for the MSW field instructors for practice that help with the program replication?
Oh, sorry, Joy, were you talking to me? I was answering a question. I was trying to answer some of the other questions.
Okay, it's okay. Yeah, the questions are really rolling in, so I was just trying to get to a few of them that others may have. But we will close out soon. Donna, do you have any last comments, either to my last question or any of the other ones that you saw that you may have been responding to in the Q&A?
I think at this point, it would be beneficial to say there are a lot of schools participating. We are going to continue to expand to the schools that participate in Southern Cal. If anybody wants to get more information, they can reach out to me. Also, I know that we're hopefully going to be doing more work on this in 2024, and I'm 100% sure that this will not be the last conversation that Joy and I will have about this workforce issue. So I'm really excited that people are enthusiastically embracing some of the work that we're doing.
And the last thing I will say is I saw a couple of questions that get at, well, basically, what do we do next? What are we recommending? As I mentioned during my presentation, we will be doing more work, outreach to the field and working with our partners to think through policy recommendations and policy proposals that will help advance the issue. I recognize that this is an emergency situation. It's a deeply serious and concerning situation. I wish that I could present a battery of policy proposals right now, but I can tell you that we are sincerely working on it, and this is a growing focus of work for us. Some of you suggested some policy recommendations in the chat. Please feel free to email me, others, or email them to the Alliance. We love hearing from you, and we look forward to working with you on this as we work with other partners like Donna. We are 1 minute over, so I'm going to close out this session. I wholeheartedly thank Donna for joining me today and working with us on this conversation. Your work is very interesting and very much a value add to the space, and definitely thank all of you who were attending and asking questions. We hope you continue to engage with us on this issue and others. Have a good afternoon. I think we're all in afternoon. Maybe a few of us are still in morning, but enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.